Hello, we are live. I am Julian Katari. I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Woman. Today we have creation dancing with constitution. The two
Yeah.
dancing forces. We've been talking about a lot about the elements and how they impregnate everything in the lives and just like this the it's like an analogy for everything. I'm seeing the elements,
Yeah.
everything you can think of. You can make an analogy with elements, and there's no better way to approach it and understand it. But so I drew the cover for the or designed the cover for this conversation with the fire and water elements, and because you've been talking about a lot about the how if you get fire and or the heat, if you heat up something and you cool it down, then life springs out of it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I thought of those images of those elements, and I guess it has something to do with this creation and constitution dancing
Yeah,
together.
for sure. So it we have a couple minutes of words from the old ones here. They wanted to pass on that the whole, especially in the U.S. for anyone watching from the U.S., this whole concept of the white hats versus the dark hats started with Donald Trump and the deep state and all that. The idea of white as good and black as evil is purely the result of cultural bigotries. That's what they wanted us to know. If you were to walk into an airtight room without a source of light, you would find yourself blind and helpless. And if we put light bulbs all over that same room and turned them on, you would still find yourself blind and helpless. So which one is evil and which one is good?
Right.
You're blind and helpless either way, right?
Right.
So there are three different things involved in the determination and classification of a color. There's hue, there's its value, and there's chroma. Hue is the position of the color in the spectrum of your visible light. Value is a matter of how much light is reflected or how bright something is. If all light is reflected, it's white. If there's no light reflected, it's black.
Mm-hmm.
Chroma is a measure of purity or saturation or intensity of color. So although white has more value than black, neither has any purity at all or intensity. So these three yardsticks are purely a Western invention. For example, a tribe in the Philippines, they have three yardsticks, but theirs are light versus darkness, then dryness versus redness, and wetness versus greenness.
Mm-hmm.
And their attitude to colors and color combinations is determined by the elements of their culture, not by any value inherent in the colors themselves. So we want you to know that color is an interpretation of the way the photons hit your retinas and not a matter of good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
So don't get fooled by white hats versus black hats.
Right. And we could go into that conversation for a long time.
Yeah, we could.
You know, and it's not, you know, in the U.S. they use that white hats, black hats, maybe, or Republican Democrats, or that.
I hadn't heard the white hats, black hats till COVID came with, and Trump had been talking about the deep state. I'd never heard the white hats versus black hats before that.
Reminds me of, did you ever see that comic book called Spy versus Spy?
Uh-oh.
It's really good. It's always this white spy versus a black spy, and one of them has a white hat, the other one has a black hat.
That's funny.
You should check it out. It's gonna make you. It's gonna fit in right in with this white hat. But then in the world, I mean, here, for example, in all Latin America, they have the same game of left and right, conservative, liberal, nationalist, globalist, but it's the same kind of game, trying to play the people, trying to bring them into a false. It's a controlled
Control mechanism, absolutely.
or a controlled solution. It's like this
Yeah.
is apparently the solution, but it's the control. We still control it, so it's
Yeah.
not the solution. It's still the same mean people having control.
Right.
Okay, well, that's what the
So
old one wanted us to hear.
that was the specific things they wanted to hear. So, so going down the creation branch more, all beings alive today are equally evolved. There are no higher beings and no lower animals. All animals and all plants develop from embryos, which are by definition multicellular. And amazingly enough, human similarities to other life forms are far more striking in similarity than their indifferences. All life we know now evolved from the smallest life forms of all, which is bacteria. And right here, right now, we're going to define evolution simply as the change through time, not as the evolving from a higher form to from a lesser form to a higher form. Is simply the change. It's the I Ching. Same thing.
Wow. You just said something very big right there. Um, there's there's this view of evolution as lesser to, like more primitive,
Right.
stupider to smarter kind of thing,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
which is not what it is.
No, that's not what it is.
It's always smart.
So evolution is simply all of history.
Mhm. Right.
So microbes, which is what a bacteria is, are any living beings, including algae, bacteria, yeast, and so forth, and can be seen more accurately with a microscope than as smudges or scum with our naked eyes. Symbiosis, or Eine, is the system in which members of different species live in physical contact. And this strikes us as unknown because of our lack of awareness, our lack of consciousness of symbiosis or Eine. Symbiosis is the living together of very different kinds of organisms or the living together of very differently named organisms. So not only are our guts and eyelashes festooned with bacterial and animal symbionts, you will also find in your backyard and your community park to have obvious omnipresent symbionts that are also in your body. So we are symbionts on a symbiotic planet and can find symbiosis or Eine everywhere. Physical contact is a non-negotiable requisite for many differing kinds of life. So symbiogenesis, which is two or new species arising from symbiotic mergers among members of old ones. And then we have cohabitation, which produces the symbiogenesis. Cohabitation is a living together, and the long-term results are the symbiogenesis, the mergers, the appearance of new bodies, new organs, and new species. Living beings all defy neat definitions because we fight, we feed, we dance, we mate, and we die. And at the base of the creativity of all large or familiar forms of life, symbiosis generates novelty. It brings together different life forms, always for a reason. So symbiogenesis brings together unlike individuals to make larger, more complex entities. We animals, all 30 million species of us, emanate from the microcosm, the microbial world, the source and wellspring of soil and air informs our survival. A major theme of microbial drama is the emergence of individuality from the community interactions of once interdependent or once independent actors. So a major theme of microbial drama is the emergence of individuality from the community of what was once independent. The tendency of independent life is to bind together and reemerge in a new wholeness at a larger, more complex level of organization. So all organisms large enough for us to see are composed of once independent microbes teamed up to become larger wholes. So that is what partnership is. Human partnership is teaming up to become a larger whole, not to be completed, teaming up together to become a larger whole. More complex, larger and more complex. So by sheer numbers, chloroplasts and mitochondria, rather than humans, are Earth's dominant life forms. Wherever we humans go, the mitochondria go too, since they are inside of us, powering all of our metabolism, that of our muscles, our digestion, our thoughtful brains. And most of our protein-making metabolisms arises from thermoacidophile bacteria. Step 1, the oxygen-respiring mitochondria in our cells and other nucleated cells evolved from bacterial symbionts, now called purple bacteria. So we come from purple bacteria. That's why I like purple so much. Step 3, the chloroplasts and other plastids of algae and plants were once free-living photosynthetic cyanobacteria. And step 4 is to note that step 2 was not described.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very familiar.
So the order, what?
It's from the, sounds familiar from the book.
Yeah. The order of evolution or creation is decisive. Corkscrew-shaped spirochetes, speedsters of the microbial world, are coiled and snake-like. Through viscous fluids such as mud, slime, mucus, and living tissues, these bacteria dart to and fro, up and down, left and right. Spirochetes merged with bacteria to interact and survive. So the life of a spirochete is to wriggle, feed, and clone. And yet their living descendants are now inextricably involved in mitotic movements and other actions of complex cells. So all cells with mitochondria also have microtubules, which are the remains of ancient wrigglers or spirochetes. Mm-hmm. And today, spirochetes dwell in vast numbers in the intestines of wood-eating insects. They are what decompose our wood for us. So, in reality, the tree of life grows in on itself because species come together, fuse, and make new beings who start again. And biologists call the coming together of the branches anastomosis. And anastomosis is branches forming nets and is a wonderfully poetic word, which it is. You can hear the fusing when you say anastomosis. So the reality is the tree of life is a twisted, pulsing entity with roots and branches meeting underground, in midair, and in our bodies to form eccentric new fruits. And symbiosis, like sex, brings previously evolved beings together into new partnerships. Like sex, too, some symbioses are protracted unions with stable, prolific features living together for 50 years, and others quickly dissolve in 2 weeks or 2 months, or however quickly our marriages dissolve. So when Ivan Wallen at Columbia University in the 1920s proposed that cell components, chloroplasts and mitochondria, originated as symbiotic bacteria, he and his ideas were roundly rejected and ridiculed because bacteria were known to be agents of disease, not originators of evolutionary novelty. And most bacteria are no more harmful than air, nor can they, like air, be ever removed from our bodies and their environment. Mm-hmm. So biologists are always exploring the astounding details of the microbes, including their toughness in the face of adversity and their tendency to survive by making symbiotic evolutionary commitments. I think that sounds like marriage.
Wow, yeah. Commitment, that's a scary word.
SEC, that's the symbiotic evolutionary commitment. That's SEC. We just need to make the C and X somehow. So, so viruses are not alive, since outside of living cells, they do nothing, ever. A virus outside the membrane of a living cell is inert, because they require the metabolism of the live cell, because they lack the requisites of their own. Metabolism is the incessant chemistry of self-maintenance and is an essential feature of life. And viruses lack metabolism. So through ceaseless metabolism, through chemical and energy flow, life continually produces, repairs, and perpetuates itself. Only cells of organisms composed of cells metabolize. So viruses are also very important to the story of life on Earth. Since they depend on the metabolism of others, they probably evolved from bacteria. And they are no more enemies of life than are bacteria or human cells. They spread genes among bacteria, human cells, and other cells. And like bacterial symbionts, viruses are sources of evolutionary variation. Like all forms of life, however, they produce problems when they overgrow their habitats. Overgrowth of resources, vital or others, tends to be due to weakening and disruption of the whole ecosystem. So we can no more be cured of our viruses than we can be relieved of our brain's frontal lobes. Because we are our viruses. So bacteria evolved first, and they branched into many different forms: red, purple, green, fermenting, photosynthetic, repairing, sulfide producing, and oxygen producing, oval, eel-shaped, and rod-shaped. And as they diversified, they came to dwell inside of each other. They merged internally, and with their viruses, they exchanged genes. Formerly independent bacteria now merged and became new kinds of complex cells. They diversified by branching, and their anastomosed, and as their branches anastomosed, tiny protists and proctists emerged. And protists and proctists are the same thing. So these complexes became protists as speciation began. Tiny protists or proctists and their colonies produced a huge and diverse group of organisms. And we still know of some 250,000 species of protoctists alive today. And they are nucleated microorganisms that underwent many evolutionary gyrations. So each one of us is a massive colony of protoctists and microorganisms. Organisms are distinguished then by how they develop from spores or fungi, from an embryo surrounded by its mother's tissue, which are plants, or from a blastula embryo, which are animals and us, or from none of the above, which are protoctists. The body, form, behavior, and development of any life form must be considered along with its molecules and internal chemicals. So ancient groups remain and diversify, and new forms may prove to be transient or stable, whereas all species tend to become extinct. The large groupings, whether called domains, kingdoms, or something else, persist. And this is what he said about William, I can't remember his last name, said about oaks. They're the least specialized, so they're everywhere. So when we become specialized, we tend to become extinct.
Okay.
So we tend to label and dismiss anything once we assign it a category. And our classifications blind us to the wildness of natural organization by supplying conceptual boxes to fit our preconceived ideas into. So we can try to group life into 3 or 5 million, or 3 or 5 or even 1 million categories, yet life itself will still elude us. And the chain of life has not yet once been broken since its formation. The tree of life has not yet once been broken. And the units of life are cells. All visible organisms are composed of nucleated cells, and they evolved by bacterial cell emerger. That's how we started. So we're going to leave creation
Okay.
alone for a little bit and go to constitution.
Okay.
So the great principle, since science figured it out, there was a God and called it a principle. It must first create and then it must constitute all it creates, right? So again, constitute means to be the elements or parts of. So out of the goddess God, yin yang movement is the three. The formless manifest into the sacred triangle that gave rise to the sacred fires of form building. One, the sacred will to live, which is our impetus to be and become. And that's become very important. Well, that's a fly flying. I was wondering what that. Because I've seen on the farm that there are some goats who have absolutely no will to live, and they just, like that, they're dead. They just die. So that fire, the sacred will, the will to live, is important. That's why the black hats and the white hats, who both have the same agenda, cannot dominate us because of this will to live.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, sacred fire, our intention, manifest in our action and the cause of our continuing. So Aini wisdom is a stream ever flowing, giving us our sense of oneness with all beings and an understanding that which all that walks, crawls, flies, or swims is some relative of us. And then number three, fire, the joyous creativity in the way of the Tao, crafting the things we need to live, cultivating seeds of good tomorrows. So as the three old ones sing with their yin yang goddess God partners, we are constituted with a consciousness body, an energy body, and a physical body. We could also say that we're constituted with our ku, our subconscious, or our younger self, our lono from Hawaii, or our conscious mind, or our talking self, and our deep self. Aha, there it is, the deep state, our deep self. our God self, or our superconscious, or kane, according in the Hawaiian culture. So as the three sing, they constitute three trees of life, or nets, in our bodies, which would be our neural net, our fluid net, and the fascial fibrous net. So we'll go to that and talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
The three networks of our body.
Okay, three networks of our body.
Right, but first, let me go let a dog in. So how the three, I'm still working it out, how the three, just stumble over one. Come on, Colby. How the three, if there's one distinct that makes one net, I don't know. Well, that answer will come as I'm questioning that. So, in the beginning was a cell, the fusion of sperm and egg, yin and yang, goddess and God. Individually, they were nothing, and combined, they could change the world. Mm-hmm. The story of that, how that cell became us, is the most amazing story ever told. It's the story that has not only created the astronomical complexity of our brains, the virility of our hearts, it is also responsible for all of our civilizations and art, love experienced, and life lost. So the cell contains everything within it to produce this, and yet it's invisible. And the space between the cells is as important as the cells themselves. So the space between the cells, what is that? How do they stay connected? That is the most ignored tissue in the world. That's our body, our fascia. That's one of our trees of life. And every nerve, muscle, blood vessel, organ, bone, and tendon is covered in it. Fascia is a Latin word for binds together. So every organ, muscle, and body part of us is vacuum packed in fascia. The vacuum is between the layers, so we are all double bagged. And fascia connects our whole body in an endless web. And so when one part of our body moves, our whole body responds. And it's all built around the cell. And there's 4 types. There's neural, muscular, epithelial, and connective, and we'll get into that more with creation. But now we're talking about the constitution with these 3 trees of life. And to understand this, we need to talk about our extracellular matrix, the spaces between the cells, which is the fascial net. Is a living matrix of a continuous and dynamic supramolecular network that extends into every nook and cranny of our bodies. So when we touch each other, we're touching an intimately connected system composed of virtually all of the molecules in our body linked together. It's our organ of form, fascial net. It's our organ of morphogenesis. So which one of the 3 old ones produces the morphogenesis? I don't know. They're all a combination of all. So connective tissue is very aptly named. While its walls of fabric act to direct fluids and create discrete pockets and tubes, its uniting function far outweighs its separating ones because it binds every cell in the body to its neighbors and even connects the inner network of each cell to the mechanical state of our entire body. So our connective tissue has 3. Notice how everything is 3 elements. Reticulin, elastin, and collagen, which is by far the most common protein in our body and predominates our fascial net, our form, and is readily seen in any cut of meat. So the transparent corneas of our eyes, the valves of our heart, the strong tendons of our feet, our spongy lungs, and our delicate membranes surrounding our brain are all made of collagen. Now, ground substance, which is the extracellular matrix, forms a continuous and highly variable glue to hold the trillions of tiny droplets of cells together. And yet, while they're glued together, they're still free to exchange the myriad of substances necessary for living. So our connective tissue cells meet the combined need of flexibility and stability by mixing a small variety of collagen fibers within a matrix that varies from quite fluid to gooey to plastic, and finally to a crystalline solid. So our bodies are a talented building, we use that generously, that is readily movable, self-repairs if it's damaged, and actually reconstructs itself both over the short and medium term to respond to different weather conditions. So whatever demand we put on our bodies, the extracellular elements are altered along the path of the stress to meet the demand. So the plasticity of fascia, its willingness to be flexible, its ability to be flexible, is its essential nature. It's its gift to our body and the key to unraveling long-term inertial patterns. So here we get, if we could make every part of our bodies invisible except for these 3 trees of life, this is where we would see the neural net, the fluid net, the fibrous fascial net. The neural net, if we could make everything else around that invisible, we would see ourselves as a tree with all kinds of branches. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't see the leaves, we would just see the veins of the branches. And we would see our exact form entirely with its individual variations. So if our nervous system or our neural net is working properly, there's no part of us that cannot feel. So which one of the old ones created this tree of life? Or did they all have 3 and all 3 have part in all of it? It's a good question. So our fluid net is our blood, our lymph, the water courseway. I would say this comes from Nagua and Pangu, the way, the Tao. So again, if we make everything invisible but our fluid system, we would once again have a filmy representation of the exact shape of our body. If we include the lymphatic system and cerebrospinal fluid, our fluid human would become even more complete. In any multicellular organism, especially for those who have crawled out of the ocean onto dry land, the inner cells, which are not in direct communication with the outside world, depend on this fluid network to bring nourishing chemistry from the outer edges of the organism to the middle, and to take otherwise toxic chemistry from the middle to the edge where it can be dispersed. And this fluid net is where the energy, this orgone energy, circulates. So our fibrous fascial net, again, if we make everything else invisible, we would see this third tree of life. We would see the body inside and out in a fashion similar to the other two nets, although in some areas the density would differ. The center of this network is the mechanical center of gravity in the middle of the lower belly, also known as the hara or lower dantian, which would be our younger self, our subconscious, our lower world, our ku. So this would be, I think this is what, according to ancient Chinese, this is our energy body is anchored in our lower dantian also. So I want to say our consciousness body is our neural network because of the feeling, because of the movement, the thinking. And then the, the fluid, there I go. I'm making myself a liar here because the fibrous fascial net would give us our form, our tensegrity. Mm-hmm. So again, they're all intermixed, but all three of them create these three trees of life that make our body. So our fascial network permeates the body, our bodies, to be part of the immediate environment of every cell. So with every touch, we contact the tone of this web, registering it, whether we are conscious or not, and affect it with our intention. All three are networks, all three are trees of life, utterly intermeshed with each other. Both anatomically and functioning, all three are made from tubes. And interestingly enough, Wilhelm Reich could cloud bust with tubes, which collect orgone energy. Okay. So although each of these networks communicates differently, they all carry information. The neural network carries encoded information, usually in a binary form, either on or off. The fluid network carries chemical information around our bodies in a fluid medium, and our fascial system conveys mechanical information. It's the interplay of tension and compression along the fibrous net, the gluey protoglycans, and through the cells. So, along with the information carried, and remember way back when we talked about the consciousness being information, our mind being information. So this is three bodies that the information singing fields of the old ones. So timing. The nervous system is widely recognized as the fastest, working in milliseconds to seconds at speeds of 7 to 170 miles per hour, not like electricity at the speed of light, not unlike. So the slowest neural message is throbbing pain and runs along tiny nerves at about 1 meter per second. So that's the slowest pain. The circulatory system, the fluid net, works on a slower time scale. The standard is that most red blood cells return through our hearts every 1.5 minutes. So many chemical levels in our blood fluctuate, though, on several hour cycle. So this system's average responsive rhythm is minutes to hours. the rhythms of the fluids work at slower scales, and yet the most known is the 28-day cycle of the menstrual system, of the bleeding system in a woman. The timing of the fascial system is interesting in that it has two rhythms. On one hand, the polarity of tension and compression communicates around our body as a mechanical vibration traveling at the speed of sound. This is roughly equivalent to about 720 miles per hour, which is more than 3 times faster than our nervous system. On the other hand, the speed at which our system responds with compensation around our structural body is much slower. So this is where we find that this year's neck pain is built on last year's mid-back pain, which derived from a sacroiliac problem 3 years earlier and rests on our lifelong tendency to sprain our left ankle. This is where when a problem becomes in the fascial network, it becomes a little difficult to erase it, to dissolve it. So all 3 of these trees of life in our bodies intertwine. So we could easily speak of the whole as a neuromyofascial web, liquid web that would encompass all 3 of these networks acting singly to respond to the changes in the environment. And each system has a set of ambassadors that runs in both directions with the ability to alter the state of the other systems and keep them interformed. So our fascial tree is the largest sense organ in our bodies, and it's also called a metamembrane. So if you asked an anatomist if their study of the human body taught them anything about the mind of the old ones, they would say, why, yes, she shows an inordinate fondness for double bagging. Because everything is double bagged in fascia. While we speak of different sections of fascia, like the plantar fascia at the bottom of our feet, fragmenting our fascia is purely a man-made distinction imposed on this net that is unitary from top to toe, from birth to death. Our fibrous net can fray with age. It can be torn asunder by injury. It can be divided by a scalpel. And underneath this is the fundamental reality of unity. So the naming of parts is one of our favorite human activities. And then indeed, it's a useful one as long as we don't let the parts be the absolute reality and lose sight of the fundamental wholeness of everything. So that's where we'll stop with the Constitution.
Well, that was very helpful to understand, because when you say Constitution, you think, what does that mean exactly? And talking about the fascia, that really helps. So that bag of, how that structure that keeps you together, keeps you as it is.
Right, the form.
And at the same time, makes the compartments of your different parts of your existence. It's really, really cool. It's really amazing how you can tie all this biological stuff to philosophical, theological stuff, and how it's not a haphazard time together or a poetical, aesthetical. These 2 things. I'll mention these 2 things together because it sounds neat on my book. It's a factual thing. It's like it's proof of the great principle impregnating all parts of life. Yeah. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why I wanted to tie it together before we get into the elemental system, is that these old ones, the gods and goddesses, the 3 old ones that I've identified, if someone else can identify 3 different ones, it's because there are no absolute truths, or very few absolute truths. This is just the way I'm presenting it. I really wanted to tie them to the three energy bodies, the subconscious, the three brains, the three minds, so to speak, which is the subconscious or our younger self, our talking self. I like that talking self, which is the conscious, and then our God self, our deep self,
Right.
our alma kua. So, yeah.
So you said this takes us into the elements.
Next week we'll go further down the branch of we're still going to be with creation and constitution.
Okay. But you'll touch on elements.
Yes, we're going to go, because in the spiral, in the spiral of life, it goes from the 3 to the 5. So now the constitution part is the 5 elements.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go further down the tree in creation also.
Okay. Wow. So this is the school I am definitely going to. This is, and you know, I was going to say I'm surrounded by, well, I'm not really surrounded by them, but I know people here in the, you know, they're known as great investigators of the university, and you know, people look at them as these big geniuses, and you know, I've met them, I've talked to them, and they're not really getting it as much as you're getting it here. I mean, it's really incredible what having the congruency of living life, of really tying what you learn in any branch you want, if it's philosophical, spiritual, shamanical, biological, whatever it is, if you're able to actually make that congruent with your life, and not you be just like a separate thing you're studying, but then your reality is different, then if you really make that fit in, and you think, well, how can I be living this life if I'm saying I'm spiritual, but at the same time I'm being harvested, my energy is being harvested by these people, by these.
Yeah, I'm allowing myself to be a resource.
Right, so that's not congruent.
Destruction, yeah.
And once you're congruent, then all the doors open up, and here we are in the best, most advanced, groundbreaking school of investigation, of knowledge, that I can guarantee there is. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to join us in our studies, in our exploration, they're most welcome to. You can find us, Aloha, I Need Living. Anywhere you search for, we'll be there. Or you can contact, comment. We are always looking forward to hearing from people. And let's invite them for next week, same time, 8:30 Central Standard Time. We continue down this branch of Constitution and Creation in this school, this Owl Dojo, this school of
Wonder
learning
working.
and wonder working, exploration, inquiry, and all that. So, anything else?
No, that's it.
Already. So I'll be closing the transmission. See you soon, folks.
Yeah.